We got breaking news.
Oh, boy.
Being reported by Brett McMurphy as well as others, ACC will add Stanford, Cal, and SMU in 2024. The league's presidents got the required 12 of 15 votes to expand the ACC's football membership to 17 schools. SMU will not receive any media rights revenue for the first 7 years.
Back up those big money donors.
While Stanford and Cal receive reduced shares. One reason ACC added Stanford, Cal, and SMU is ESPN's media rights deal with ACC allows ESPN to renegotiate if league drops below 15 members. With potential future departures of Florida State, Clemson, and North Carolina potentially, all who voted against expansion, the ACC wanted to get Power 5 schools now opposed to Group of 5 schools later to maintain their required membership number. So there you go. See, they're anticipating that this is not going to please Florida State because Florida State has basically said, even your uneven revenue sharing model, it does not get us close to what the Big Ten and the SEC are making. And that's the kind of money we believe our brand, all right, is worthy of. That's our valuation of our brand. And then Clemson and North Carolina may also decide, hey, man, Florida State, if you're going to go get some more money, we'll go with you because our brands are pretty strong too. Clemson, of course, in football. North Carolina, that's Jumpman. That's your Michael Jordan and, North Carolina basketball. So they would make them sexy and attractive to other conferences as well.
Well, and that's the battle of lawyers because granting of rights through 2036, and can they fight their way out? I know some at Florida State have said we believe we can. Mm-hmm. That would be a court battle. But either way, now it's an 18-team league, and people talk about what SMU. It expands the footprint is really what this is about. And we know behind the curtain of all of this, the Wizards of Oz are Fox and ESPN. They're the ones making this happen. And as we said earlier, the ACC wants more money from ESPN. ESPN said, no, we're not giving you more money. We're in agreement through 2036. Exactly. Why would we do that?
Yeah.
Well, and this is where they went back to ESPN behind the curtain and said, look, what if we added a team in Texas and in a huge media market like the DFW? And then what if we add 2 schools from the West Coast so you can have for your inventory, Stanford and Cal, you got games on the West Coast and the Pacific time zone as well. And yes, it's a coast-to-coast conference, just like the Big Ten now. And, that's the argument. And so ESPN's willing to spend more with them, add more loot to the overall haul because they're now, playing in different time zones and expanding the brand and expanding the reach. And then the argument has been they had to get one of those schools, Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina or Clemson to agree because they were stalemated. There were 4 votes against, and they needed
to turn somebody.
They needed one person to flip.
Yeah.
And who did that? Who is that? I'm sure somebody will reveal that because the idea is the extra money that ESPN will add now, and the fact that it's not going to go to SMU for 7 years, and it's not going to go but nickels on the dollar to Cal and Stanford.
Yep.
The argument is that can go to the Florida States and the Clemsons in an uneven revenue sharing model for the short term here to appease them and keep them in the conference and say, okay, here's extra money for you.
Just shut up for a while.
Shut up.
Be happy. Shut up and take my money.
And that came from ESPN, but ESPN needed something that would make them willing to go. The other big part of that story in my mind, Rod, is that Notre Dame was a strong advocate for adding.
I think that's a big part of it too.
That may have because Jack Swarbrick.
They could compel some other members.
Yeah, because they want to play Stanford every year, and now that can be.
They need another member that's high-minded in academics like them.
Well, and think about it. Okay, and I know people, don't want to think about the money and the TV and how they're driving everything, because it's the big business. But so think about it. If Notre Dame's pushing for it now, ESPN has a chance. So every year Notre Dame can play either Cal or Stanford on the road, right, as a road game with their tie to the ACC. And guess what? ESPN's going to be able to broadcast that game every year. Well, in the late evening, they're going to be able to play Notre Dame Stanford or Notre Dame Cal.
In content.
And then, of course, NBC will get the home game every other year. That's the content. And that's a big game for them. That'll drive a lot of revenue and eyeballs to ESPN. And, that's smart. Think about it. How did Texas buy its way out of Texas and Oklahoma get out of the Big 12 a year early? They made the concession with Fox that Texas would not play a home game with Michigan next year. They'd make it a road game. And then that game would go to Fox. And Fox would be able to take the revenue from that huge game with two huge brands, Michigan Texas.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the big house. It's going to be the big noon kickoff. That was the concession.
Mm-hmm.
And think, I mean, that's worth millions of dollars to Fox to get that game away from ESPN, to be able to make that their lead game in September. And that was a huge part of the concession that Fox was able to pull that away from ESPN. And then, that's the networks negotiating, and that helped Texas and Oklahoma get out of the Big 12 a year early. And that's just, you always have to go, when you think about how are these things happening, why are they happening, you have to go straight to TV. Straight to TV, because they're pushing all the buttons.
Puppeteers, man, behind the scenes.
And they're looking for content.
And by the way, the best content for these networks, these broadcast networks these days are sports and news, because it's only two things that Americans are willing to watch live as a social event. Everything else, we want to watch DVR it, we want to stream it, we don't want to watch it live. We'll watch sports live. We'll watch news, kind of like these presidential debates or whatever that are about to happen. Americans will watch them live. We don't watch a lot of things live. You can count them on one hand.
Heck, Rod, we
watch them at our own convenience.
With our partnership and connection with Inside Texas, I'm going to be hosting the Watch It With Us in-game live broadcast of a game.
Exactly.
It's our version of, for every Longhorn game, there'll be a Manning cast. Where I will host it and you will join, and Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton and all the insiders, and we'll watch the game together. Not only people to make an appointment to watch these games.
It's a social occasion.
They'll also watch their computer on YouTube and they'll engage.
And I'll go on social media and I want to tweet about it and talk about it, engage about it. Yeah. It's one of the only things, but people do that also with politics, and it's why politics and news are really big.
It's where they're most passionate.
Yeah, exactly. These are passion. That's a great point. Passion. That is also something that links these two things together. Passion, and they're starting to hone in on that. Here's the real quick quote, and this is obviously before this news, but this was from the Florida State board chairman. And remember, he was talking about how Florida State's displeased with their current state and their current media rights deal with the ACC. He said, quote, "We have gotten a lot of counsel on the grant of rights document, and that will not be a document that keeps us from taking action."
Dang.
I'll leave it at that. This is what Peter Collins, the FSU board chairman, said about the grant of rights. It will not keep us from taking action.
And if you've ever, most of us have been to a lawyer, they're just legal opinions.
Yeah.
And you got to prove it. You got to win your case, and that becomes the battle of lawyers for sure.
But does
this make Florida State happier? Or does it make Florida State and Clemson a little easier that this bonus cash?
I don't know if it does. Here's the other quote that he gave about uneven revenue sharing. He said, quote, "It's not going to get us there." Okay. Let's say it gives Florida State $6 million more a year. Okay, well, now we're not losing $35 million a year. We're losing $29 million a year. It's still insurmountable. When you go to the schools and say, we're spending X and you're spending Y, we're competing at this level and you're not, it's a touchy subject. So he's basically saying, and by the way, another quote from a member of that board said, "It's not a matter of if, but when Florida State leaves the ACC." And they know that's why they decided to, craft this arrangement the way they did. Like, hey, let's anticipate we may have some departures.
Well, to leave, you have to have somewhere to go. And at least publicly, Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, has said we're happy with a 16-team conference right now. Because the most logical place would be the Florida State and Clemson roll into the SEC. And make it an 18-team conference. And that still could happen if the legal, impasse can be reached. And this would still keep, even if Florida State and Clemson were to leave, this would still leave the ACC at 16 teams, right? With these additions. So again, it's hot and heavy all the time. But again, this texter says, "But Cal and Stanford add no substantive value. They have no appeal. I don't get the acquisitions." Again, just go to the TV.
Yeah, it's about markets.
Go to the markets. Go to the time zone. I know it seems it's not about football. I know their teams have not been great. I get it. It's not about that. ESPN wants West Coast primetime programming. Yeah. And I said Notre Dame will play at Cal or Stanford every year. Well, and you can send Clemson to play at Stanford every few years.
It's a big,
And that's how they think. They think long term. And again, well, why would you add SMU? Because SMU doesn't cost you anything, and now you're in the fourth largest media market in the country. And SMU's not any good. Well, you project if they get better, if they can recruit to being in the SEC, and they're playing big TV games where Dabo Swinney is bringing his Clemson team to the Metroplex to play SMU. Again, none of this is perfect. The only two conferences that have have checked all the boxes are the SEC and the Big Ten.
Ding, ding, ding.
Everyone else is trying to cobble something together that can be as competitive as possible, like the Big 12 and the ACC. And we know that the Pac-12 is now officially gone. And so it's a big four. There's a power four and a group of 6 conferences now. And this is the way the TV networks want it. They wanted 4. They didn't want 5. That's an uneven number. They wanted 4.
Mm-hmm.
And, whether it was going to be the Big 12 that survived or collapsed, or the Pac-12 that survived or collapsed, that was going to be up to those 2 conferences. And obviously, Brett Yormark and the Big 12 Conference won that. And the Pac-12's over, and now everyone else is finding one of the other 4.
Yeah, the most intriguing story of this realignment saga here with them, the ACC adding these schools is SMU just deciding, you know what, we'll just go without any revenue sharing for 7 years. We'll do this thing pro bono for a
and that's
while.
why they've been raising money from their big money. They think they think they've raised $200 million already to help offset the what were they making in the American Athletic Conference? $5 million a year?
Not much. Yeah, not much. So
and the idea is, if you're SMU, and again, this is long term. Remember when?
They're just an investment in the future.
Yeah, you remember when you're planting a seed essentially, and one day it'll be a tree, right? That's what.
Yeah, and you won't be around to see it, like that tree you planted in your yard. When it looks beautiful,
you'll have sold
56, it. Yeah, you already moved on.
Well, because when Jay Hartzell made the shocking decision at the time, the announcement that shocked everybody that Texas was going to the SEC. What did he call it? He called it a 50-year decision, right? Yep. This is what's best for Texas over the next, several decades.
Yep.
And so if you're SMU, short term, your boosters will carry you revenue-wise for the next 7 years. But after that, hopefully, this thing has taken some root, and all of a sudden, you're way better off than you would have been staying in the American Athletic Conference 7 years from now.
Yeah, the goal is to be TCU, kind of what they've become.
Right. And look what happened to TCU since joining the Big 12 and getting out of the Mountain West Conference.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that has grown them. And more than ever, you have to be in one of these 4 conferences if you're going to thrive and grow over the coming years, because everyone else is going to fade back.
Well, and we're dealing with probably the most uncertain and unstable time in college sports, because we have no idea what's going to happen with NIL in terms of federal legislation that's coming. We just don't know how it's going to look, right? The transfer portal, stuff like that. All these things are brand new, and there's really kind of, that's not a lot of guardrails.
None.
As we know on these things.
That's coming, by the way.
Exactly. That's coming in the future. And when everything settles down, you want to be in a conference that has stable leadership, and that leadership has a vision for the future and how to handle this ever-changing landscape of college sports. And the truth is, that's why and money is part of it too. But that's a big reason why Jay Hartzell and Kevin Eltife and CDC and Chris Plonsky, they decided to make the move. We got to make this move because, like you said, 50 years from now, we have no idea how college football is going to look, and we need to make sure that we have stable leadership that can handle the uncertainty and the changing landscape in college. They have a vision for how to handle it, and that's why you went to the SEC.
Yeah.
Because Sankey's that guy.
And I will say this. I mean, we get a timeout. We'll come back to Rod's rant. We'll come back to Rod's rant of the day and get into some Texas football talk. I have a question for Rod.
We'll talk Rice.
Longhorns are coming. But also, I think, in the game of musical chairs, I think this move here that if you're just tuning in, ACC has voted to add SMU, Stanford, and Cal. Came down after a board of the school presidents last night. I think the music's over. I think this will be it for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
I think because everyone was trying to figure out, okay, where are we going to land Stanford and Cal? We need them. Notre Dame was pushing for it. And, okay, we'll add SMU because the Metroplex and the ACC gets a team in Texas. I think that's it for a while. Now, there could be movement within those teams.
What's a while? Because I think Florida State's going to get.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think
Florida State wants out.
Okay, but that could come. But they're going to go from one power conference to another.
Yes.
I think the group of 4 set.
Oh,
I think those are your teams now.
Yeah.
I think those are your teams now.
Yeah.
They're not going to be none of those conferences are going to add anybody else, unless Notre Dame wants to get in the conference. But they're essentially in the ACC now because they had so much power in making this happen. So now they're going to stay comfortable in the ACC and even grow that relationship with the Atlantic Coast Conference. The Big Ten can forget about adding Notre Dame ever in my mind. And this is it. This will be it.
I don't disagree with that.
So if your school is not in the group of 4 now, sorry. I think they're done.
And what's our final number then?
I'll count it up when we come back. I got to do some math.
Oh yeah, it takes a while.
St. Edwards.
You never want to do math live on air. We've learned that. That's always a mistake.
I'll be wrong.
Always a mistake. They carry the 3. Nope, always a mistake.
We'll have that coming back. Then Rod's rant. Then for the end of the hour, a little bullish or BS to start the first day of September.